Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are the news division of United Network. And our mission is to bring you the real news. What's really happening in our communities, what's happening in our countries, in our world, and even throughout the multiverse. And our network releases lots of content throughout the week. We have in-depth news coverage, which includes local stories as told through the eyes of our field messengers. I'll tell you more about that in just a bit. We talk about the restoration of our planet and how we're creating the new Earth together. We have updates from the Global Intelligence Agency of what is really happening here on our planet in this crazy battle of good versus evil. If you want more information about who we are, what we do, and check out some of our work, you can go to unitednetwork.earth. What we're doing today, what this podcast is all about, is we review the main stories that we discussed this last week. You know, all the content that we released. What are some of the big things? So this is a great way to catch up if you have missed some of our updates. Sometimes they can run a little bit long. So if you want to just catch up, if you want to share UNN with other people, because most of our content is behind a paywall originally, because that's how we pay the people that work on the news. And then about a week after it's released just to our members, then we do post our updates, our news updates, to Rumble and YouTube. But as you guys know, we can't guarantee it's going to stay there. We don't have control over those platforms. But if you can wait a week, then you can catch all of our content there. As always, I encourage you guys to think critically. Ask yourself questions as we go through some of this material, because if you're new to watching our content and listening to us, then some of this may seem a little far out there, because reality is very different than what we've been told. But I encourage you guys to stick with us, because even if some things don't make a lot of sense right now, if you keep listening, things will make sense. And I believe your whole life will start to make more sense, because there's a lot of people scratching their heads right now going, gosh, things just seem off. And they have no idea what's really going on behind the scenes. And we encourage you guys, when you discover these cool things, share it with other people, right? Because that's how we're all going to grow and learn. All right, any announcements? My voice is a little off. This has been a crazy week. Not just for UNN stuff, but just on our planet. This has been a crazy week. We will get into that in the GIA report, but it has impacted a lot of us personally. You know, the crazy stuff happening, the weird energies and frequencies on the planet. I know in my house, it started actually with my husband. He started not feeling so well. I was getting headaches throughout the week. And it turned into full-blown, I don't even know what this is, besides let's take away Sunny's voice. I'm sure that was pretty intentional on their part, or whatever negative frequencies are out there. You know, they like to attack, the things that are going to help us move forward with our mission, right? And for me, it's my voice to be able to talk to you guys and tell you guys, stuff that's going on. So this is my 1-900 or 1-800-SEXY voice that you're going to get today. So take it while you can, because hopefully next time I do a rundown report, my voice will be normal again. All right, let's dive into this, guys. Here is the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. Okay, let's kick things off with our amazing field messengers, which of course is what UNN is all about. This was the original download that we got from Source about restoring the news and really making it about the people. For so many years, we've had other people telling our stories, right? You have correspondents that fly all over the world from these news groups, and it's always through their set of eyes. And we know, too, that there are agendas tied to most of these things, especially in mainstream media, but also in alternative media, too. And so we think the best way to break away from all that is to have you guys talk. Talk to us. What a concept. Let's start talking to each other and giving each other information about what's really going on. We have these phones that, kind of are attached to us. I know in my house, I'm always telling my kids, get that phone away, get off the phone, or get off the computer, whatever. So we're on these things all the time. Why not use them for good? And that's what our field messengers do. When something is going on in their community that they want to share with the world, they record it, they send it into our awesome production team who puts it together in the form of a news report. And then we run it on the news, which is pretty cool. So let's run through the stories, the field messenger reports that we worked on for this week. So Amy out of New Jersey, Amy's been reporting quite a bit. It's pretty cool. She talks to a New Jersey beekeeper who has over 200 hives, is dedicated to producing and selling honey. But this is interesting. So when he sells the honey, he uses it to fund research related to bees and hives and beekeeping, everything that comes along with that, because there are some challenges in the beekeeping business. And, businesses or industries are always changing, and he wants to help provide information to help these beekeepers as much as possible. So I love it. Not only is he in the industry, but he's trying to help the industry. It's a beautiful thing. So Amy kind of tags along with him. He shows us some of the products that he sells, and then just tells us more about his mission. Pretty cool. Oh, I always mess up this name. I apologize in advance. Tritra to them, I believe it is, out of India. He shows us these hemp products. So there is a local entrepreneur in India who has been collaborating with local farmers to develop all these hemp-based products. And hemp is local to the area. I believe hemp can be grown in a variety of places, but it is grown locally there. He is using this entrepreneur is using this as a way to spread his culture and to educate people about the incredible benefits of using hemp in many different ways. And this is something I think we all need to learn a lot about. We hear kind of the negative side of hemp with marijuana and some of the dangers of that, but it is an amazing plant. I told my husband, oh gosh, this was probably a couple months ago. I was kind of joking, but kind of not. And I'm like, we should grow hemp. And he looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, no, you have no idea. Like hempcrete, all the, hemp clothing. I'm thinking there's like so many cool things you can do with this. Medicinal things as well, not just the marijuana stuff. But anyway, so that was a great report out of India. Our Nightway Calen out of Uganda takes us to this really cool site. And I believe it's even a little bit of a tourist area in Uganda. And we're calling it the Eclipse Museum. I don't know if I'd really consider it a museum because I think of like a big, indoor structure. This is actually outdoor. And they call it the Eclipse site because it's kind of hard to explain. It's really helpful if you actually see the story. But this is where the sun and moon have come together to create an eclipse. That's what an eclipse is, right? And they consider this site historic. I'm not sure if this has happened multiple times, but they actually have statues there and some engravings and things on the ground that you can check out. And so if you're ever in the area of Uganda, the eclipse site is something that you may want to visit. Diane, also out of Uganda, takes us to this waterfront village. This was in eastern Uganda. And, this story really moved me because this was an outing. She happened to, be in this area, and she shows us kind of the life of this local community. They're nestled along the Nile River. And she called them businesses. It's so interesting. I mean, it is a business. If you're selling something to someone, I guess that's a business. But they're, it's a dirt road, right? And you have these structures that, a lot of people would probably say should be restored. And I'm sure the people there too would be like, hey, if we could do this, as part of a restoration project, this could be really cool. But it really does put things into perspective. So you saw a lot of women in this story. There may have been men as well, but they were doing different things. Their businesses, so to speak, ways that they were providing for their family. They were preparing food for people. And that I think she actually had lunch at a place too, is like a single table and some, again, related to food, they're preparing food. There was also this area, I hesitate to call it a movie theater, but an area where you could go, and I think they're watching, she said, football. But these kids were like looking through because everything was like closed up because you had to pay in order to be part of this group to see the football game. And it was just a really interesting perspective. That's the beauty of these field messenger reports, because you're not going to see a lot of this on regular news. But we need to know about, these different communities and how people are operating, how people are living their lives. It's just different throughout the world, and it really makes you think about your own life, and maybe some things you take for granted or whatever. So, Diane, if you're listening, I really did appreciate that report. That really put some things into perspective for me, for sure. Emma out of Spain tells us she's actually out of the Canary Islands. So it's not part of mainland Spain, but it's nearby, right? And the Canary Islands have a very rich maritime heritage. And she tells us about the tradition of Vela Latina sailing. So way back when, in order to get to the Canary Islands, things are a little bit different nowadays, but way back when, you used to have to take these boats. And so this is kind of an event, I'll call it an event, or she calls it a tradition, where they have these same type of boats that they used to actually get to the Canary Islands a long time ago. And they take them out, and now they've got sails on them, and they kind of, it's a way to just remember your history. They've created this competitive kind of sport, I guess I'll call it, out of it. It's just a very beautiful thing, too, if you look out on the water and you see all these really, small boats, but, beautiful wooden boats with sails on them. So, she says it was very important. These boats were, very important for trade and for settlement. And it's just a way to kind of remember the past. All right, Lana from Alaska. She goes over to the Aleutian Islands to learn a little bit more about their natural beauty and their history as well. And so she takes us on a little bit of a journey, tells us more about the area. She visited a church. There was a bunker there. All of the industry over there is related to maritime trade. So again, we're getting to see a different area of the world, learn a little bit more about its history and what those people are all about. Rick, who is typically out of Arizona, but I'm assuming he was vacationing, because he said in the story that he and his wife have gone several times. They went to Hawaii, and there was an event going on there. So they kind of gave us a little bit behind the scenes of hula dancing, it's beautiful, right? Captures the spirit of Hawaii, the gods, their cultural traditions. And so Rick just tells us a little bit about it. We get to see some beautiful dancing. I had to tell you, so I'm on the West Coast, right? I'm in the San Diego area of California, and Hawaii isn't too far away. Kind of made me want to, I've been there one other time, but I was very young. And so kind of made me want to, I don't know, say, hey, hubby, you want to hop on a plane and go to Hawaii? Because I had a lot of fun when I was there before. All right, Melissa out of Puerto Rico gives us the history of Puerto Rico. She was over there, and this is kind of one of those stories that it's kind of sad. Actually, so is Hawaii, if you look into the history and, oh man, our politics. I know our governments love to put a spin on all this and, we freed all these places. And really, the truth is much, much more dark. But Melissa, with regards to Puerto Rico, talks about it, the area, how it used to be a Spanish colony and then it became a U.S. territory. There's been a lot of political tension around it, natural disasters. It's kind of a mess, I'm not going to lie. And it has nothing to do with the beautiful people that live there. We've made a mess of all of this. Our politics have made a mess. The world structure has made a mess of all this. I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how, when restoration really starts to happen and not everything is about money, and when governments start to crumble, I think you're going to see a lot of people, I know people are, here in the U.S. are very concerned about illegal immigrants, but I think a lot of that is kind of going to fade away, because I think most people want to go back to their homeland. Right? They're doing whatever it is they're doing because they feel like they have to, or I don't know, maybe some people are being bussed in and being paid, for some political reason. But still, it's because they need the money or whatever. It all, I feel like everything, boils down to money right now. And so it's going to be very refreshing, I think, when these places start to, really be able to represent themselves, right? Where the people can really lead themselves as opposed to some government that doesn't really care about them taking over. It's such a sad situation. These places have such rich culture, and the people there are just incredible. And it's horrible because a lot of these people, have been oppressed, and that's why, their countries are in debt or whatever. And like I said, we're meaning the U.S. sometimes painted as this superhero, which is not usually true. That we come in and we save the day and whatever. But like I said, when things start to turn around, which we're already in that process. I know it doesn't seem like it all the time, but I think we're going to see a lot of liberation for these countries, and that's a very beautiful thing. So thank you, Melissa, for telling us a little bit more about the history of Puerto Rico. We certainly wish the best for everybody there. Kim out of Oregon, which is a state in the U.S., she takes us to the Art and Air Festival, which is just a lot of fun. It's just good old family fun. A lot of live music, and there were a bunch of vendors there. This went into the nighttime, a ton of dancing, which I love to dance, so that's fantastic. But they had these beautiful hot air balloons. I don't think the balloons actually went into the sky, but you know how you have to have hot air, right, for the balloon to rise. So they were firing up these balloons even though they were still on the ground, and it just looked really beautiful at night. And I think she said there were over 60 artists at the market, so a bunch of booths and stuff. I don't know if that came through. Booths. Kind of sound like a couple other words that I don't want to say. So moving on, guys. Thank you, Kim from Oregon. We really appreciate your story. It's just been one of those weeks, you guys. Let's move on to our news stories. All right, so these are a little bit more in-depth stories that our team has been working on for you guys to really dive into stories that are newsworthy, but we also try to give you some more of the background, what's going on. We include some sound bites and stuff like that. So we did a story on payment app issues. Now, this is happening more in the U.S., but it's also a worldwide story. Payment apps have revolutionized money management, right? They offer convenience, accessibility for daily transactions. Like if you're splitting bills, you go out with a friend and, someone covers it, or you want to split the bill or whatever. It's just easier to give people money. If you're buying someone a coffee or you're sending money abroad or something like that. There's nearly 3/4 of U.S. consumers that use these apps last year, so in 2023, their popularity has surged, especially amongst young users. However, here's the issue. These apps often lack the consumer protection of traditional banks. So if you're using these as your primary checking account, if you're keeping large amounts of money in these accounts, that can be an issue. And this was seen in the 2023 collapse of the fintech company Synapse, which left 100,000 Americans locked out of $265 million in deposits. So yeah, probably don't want to keep a lot of money there. Banks at this point are probably a safer bet. Here's a little bit more on that.
Here are 4 reasons why bank accounts are safer than payment apps like Venmo or Cash Apps. The FDIC does not insure these payment apps, so that means if one of them goes out of business tomorrow, you are not guaranteed to get your money back. And it takes 3 days to transfer money to your bank account. So if an unexpected bill comes up, you're going to need to instantly transfer it and pay a fee. Using these apps means you're missing out on earning interest, so put your money in a high-yield savings account instead. It's important to transfer your money to your bank account so it can be safe, secured, and insured by the FDIC.
Unlike FDIC-insured banks, payment apps may invest user funds in risky ventures, and that leaves consumers vulnerable in cases of fraud or insolvency. Now, the good news is there are some efforts underway to strengthen regulations, including proposals for deposit insurance rules and supervision of major non-bank payment companies. While payment apps are convenient, we all know that, users should remain cautious of potential risks to safeguard their funds. All right, let's talk about iodine, because our bodies are usually lacking in this, if you didn't already know. And iodine is a vital nutrient. It is essential for thyroid health, hormone regulation, and overall development. But deficiency remains a global concern, especially in areas where they have soil that's iodine deficient or limited use of iodized salt, which may or may not be too good for you anyway. But those areas, we're seeing a lot of iodine deficiency. Vulnerable groups include pregnant women, vegans, and individuals avoiding iodine-rich foods such as seafood, dairy, and eggs. Iodine supports metabolism, brain development, immune function, and detoxification. And deficiency can lead to cognitive issues, goiters, and brittle hair and skin.
There's virtually no iodine whatsoever in the average American diet. So many people, when they just start using an iodine supplement like Lugol solution, they magically feel better. They're like, no, you don't understand. It's like a light came on in my brain. These are quotes that I've heard from patients. I've had cold hands and cold feet for the last 20 years. I don't have that anymore. It's like a veil has been lifted off my eyes. It's like I can think clearly now. All this stuff I hear, because doctors think, and most patients think, that they're only iodine receptors in the thyroid gland. That the thyroid, that's all that uses iodine. Not true at all. There are iodine receptors in the brain. There are iodine receptors in the gonads, in the breast tissue, all over the body. The entire body needs iodine.
And since the body cannot produce its own iodine, it must come from sources. We mentioned some of these just a bit ago. Seaweed. I'm going to get through this today, guys. Seaweed, fish, dairy, and iodized salt. Addressing iodine deficiency requires careful balance, so ideally it would be guided by a health official. All right, talking about health, we're going to talk about pharmaceuticals in our water. What is going on here? Pharmaceutical pollution is an escalating environmental issue with traces of drugs from human and agricultural use contaminating our rivers, lakes, and oceans. Medications that pass through our bodies, improper disposal, and runoff from hospitals, factories, and farms, well, all of this is contributing to the problem. These compounds, which are designed to resist breakdown, are persisting in our nature. It's harming aquatic life, and it's also re-entering our drinking water, with hormones, antidepressants, and antibiotics posing significant risks. Antibiotics and waterways fuel antimicrobial resistance, while hormones disrupt reproduction in fish and amphibians.
If your fish looks happier than you, it's probably on Prozac. Yes, you heard that right. Welcome to the Prozac ponds, folks. Our fishy friends are now the unintended patients of human antidepressants. Researchers found fluoxetine, the active ingredient in Prozac, in lakes and rivers. And it's a real splash in the fish community. These finned Prozac poppers are experiencing some wild side effects. Male guppies are growing. Well, let's just say their mating equipment is getting a little extra attention. But here's the kicker. While they might look more attractive, their sperm mobility takes a dive. So it's like having a fancy sports car with no gas. 0 to 60 in, never. Even low levels of this stuff can mess with our aquatic buddies. The energy they spend flaunting their new assets leaves them with less for, survival. So next time you flush a pill, remember, our fish might just start scheduling therapy sessions.
The visual on that, guys. It's pretty funny. Not a funny topic, but funny visual. So a lot of people with this are like, what about the wastewater treatment plants? Well, those plants are ill-equipped to remove these chemicals, and that has prompted calls for sustainable solutions like eco-friendly drug design, better disposal practices, and reduced antibiotic use in farming. That's a big one. Addressing this issue is crucial for safeguarding both environmental and human health. Well, have you heard about the scam with dental implants? Now, we know dental implants are transformative, really, for missing teeth. They offer a natural-looking and durable alternative to traditional options, but scams have raised concerns. Investigations reveal some dentists push unnecessary procedures, profiting over patient health. That's not a good thing. With costs reaching up to $65,000, probably even more, for avoidable treatments. Take a look at these dentists/dental implantists. I don't think that's a real title, but I'm going to go with it, talking about the issue.
No, I'm against their overuse and their inappropriate use.
Yeah.
This is what happens. There are a lot of people who can do good implants, and there are very few who can do good crown and bridge. So in their mind, they're like what I would call one-trick ponies, because the answer to everything is implants, and they stretch it beyond the limitations of what it's designed for. And that's why a lot of people get into trouble, because they don't all work the way they say.
I can't wait till we can just regrow our teeth. It's coming. Not soon enough, but it's coming. All right. Dental tourism provides more affordable options abroad, but it also carries some risks like unqualified practitioners, poor hygiene, and hidden costs. To avoid scams, patients should research thoroughly, seek multiple opinions, and ensure transparency in treatment plans. Of course, dental implants can be effective, they can be reliable, but you got to be informed, right? And have a healthcare professional that you trust. Let's talk about the sun, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. Sunlight exposure, while historically linked to risks like skin cancer, right? They love to scare us to death with all that. It actually offers significant health benefits, including reducing cardiovascular disease and some cancer risks through vitamin D production. Studies show UV exposure can extend lifespan without increasing melanoma mortality. Take a listen.
Sunlight reduces the size of internal cancerous tumors.
I thought sun causes cancer.
Well,
Everybody says stay out of the sun because it causes cancer.
That's right. They did a study at Baylor University where they took two groups of experimental animals. They gave one the standard American diet, which is terrible. They gave the other one a highly nutritious diet. Then they exposed both groups of animals to the ultraviolet rays of the sun. In the group on the standard American diet, 25% got skin cancer. In the group on the highly nutritious diet, not one animal got skin cancer. It's the way we're eating. Skin cancer is a relatively new phenomenon in the last 60 years or so, and yet our ancestors for hundreds of years have been living outdoors, working outdoors, and they didn't get skin cancer. It's a new phenomenon.
That is fascinating. Modern indoor lifestyles and UV protection measures contribute to widespread vitamin D deficiency. Of course, this affects both adults and kids, especially our kids, right? They grow up thinking, oh my gosh, the sun, I have to protect myself so much. So, they're like never in the sun unless they like got, gobs of whatever lotion on them. Experts recommend balanced sun exposure, as recommendations may vary on individual factors like your location, your skin type, and the season. When sunlight isn't accessible, UV devices can offer an alternative. Of course, moderation and mindfulness are key to reaping sunlight's health advantages safely. So don't completely freak out about the skin. But I thought that soundbite was really interesting, right? Because it's really what we're eating. It's not that the sun is bad for us. So a lot of this, when we talk about the restoration, it's not just of our planet, it's of our bodies, right? Getting ourselves back to the point where we can thrive in this environment. All right, school safety. I wanted to do this story because I felt like, for those of you that don't know, I homeschool my girls who are a little bit younger. My boys are a little older, and they go to public schools. And I was noticing that I am getting a lot of messages from my son's high school about crazy stuff happening. And this is like a really good school. So I wanted to do a story about where are our schools, okay, as far as safety is concerned. Now, we know that schools are vital spaces for growth, for learning, for connection, but our kids have to be safe. And I'm not just talking about gun violence, because that's not going on in my kids' school, but there was a stabbing between two females, nonetheless, over some boy. I was like, what in the world is going on here? Globally, 1 in 3 students faces violence at school. And in the U.S., although this happens everywhere, in the U.S., 67% of schools report violent incidents, while bullying affects 1 in 5 students. So I want to play this soundbite for you. This is someone explaining, I think she's out of Ohio, state of Ohio. And she is explaining what happened with a student there as a result of bullying.
So yesterday at the middle school, there was a child who, was taken because he had a list of 30 people who had been bullying him that he planned on taking out. And so how did this come about? How did we find out about it? Well, it wasn't administrators and it wasn't teachers. It was kids. It was other kids getting involved and actually coming forward with the information. And so instead of focusing on the 14-year-old child that had the list, who also had mental instability issues, emotional distress issues, who had literally been pulling his hair out from the level of stress, anxiety, and bullying that he was experiencing in the hallways and in the schools, we're going to talk about how it got to this point. Kids do not just wake up one day and decide, hey, this is a list of 30 people that I'm taking out. They don't do it. Kids don't wake up one day after they've been pulling their hair out from stress over and over and over with emotionally. They don't just say, hey, this is the day.
That's a good point. Teachers, too, face challenges, including verbal abuse and disruptions. Effective strategies combine physical security measures such as cameras and controlled access with community building efforts. This includes mental health services and social emotional learning. However, limited funding and inadequate mental health support remain barriers for all of this. A collaborative approach from governments, educators, and parents is essential to create supportive, secure schools where students can thrive. Of course, I believe everything starts in the home, right? And we need to be talking to students. And like, in these sound bites, I don't know if it's the one we just played, but another soundbite we played as part of this story, it's the kids that are noticing this and bringing, these issues to the attention. And that's just creating a healthy environment where people feel like they can speak out. That is a huge way of protecting your school in general. So, I know a lot of these schools don't have funding, for all this fancy equipment, but sometimes it's just, speak when you see something, out of place, when you see that a kid is depressed or people are bullying or whatever. We have to support each other. Got to keep our schools safe. We also did a story about ADHD and questioning it. So ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It is a neurodevelopmental condition. It affects people's focus, time management, emotional regulation, and information processing. And this happens across all ages. Diagnoses are rising globally, prompting debates about overdiagnosis and subjectivity about how these tests are assessed. Like, how do you determine if someone has ADHD? A lot of this is very subjective. ADHD symptoms typically fall into two categories: inattention and hyperactivity impulsivity. These symptoms can vary widely and significantly impact daily life.
5 misconceptions about ADHD that need to be eliminated today. Number 1, everyone with ADHD is hyper and overactive. This is false. Some people with ADHD can sit perfectly still. Number 2, people with ADHD cannot focus on anything for long periods of time. This is completely false. In fact, if you ask someone with ADHD if they can focus on things they like to do for long periods of time, they will say yes. Number 3, ADHD is a childhood issue that people grow out of. This is an antiquated belief that is entirely false. There are adults that have ADHD. People with ADHD don't just outgrow it. Number 4, ADHD is caused by problematic parenting. Totally false. You can be the greatest parents in the world and still have a child with ADHD. Number 5, ADD and ADHD are different diagnoses. No, ADD is the former term that was used and has been replaced by ADHD.
Critics argue that societal pressures and cultural biases may contribute to labeling normal behaviors as disordered, raising concerns about over-medication. On the other hand, ADHD brings unique strengths like creativity, hyperfocus, adaptability, and innovation. Like, a lot of times we look at these things as like, oh, they're not like normal people. But the more you learn about how our world actually is and how things are run, you're like, it's actually a good thing you're not normal, quote unquote, because we need people like this. We need people that think outside the box, because so many of us were just, myself included, just in this, rat race for such a long time, not even realizing what was going on around me. Well, it's people that can think differently that are going to help the rest of society. And now all of you too, if you're listening to this podcast, you fall into that category too. You now think differently, right? So instead of looking at these things like things that are labeled as ADHD, maybe this is just a different way of learning. Maybe there are some small things that we can do, and we talk about this in the story with, different foods that you can eat, different ways of treating it if it's uncontrollable. But still, we should be embracing how people think in different ways, because that's how we're going to get to the next level. We really have to do some outside the box thinking in order to improve our planet and create a place where we can all thrive. All right, let's talk about fuel costs in Nigeria. Nigeria is Africa's largest oil producer. It is grappling with severe fuel shortages, skyrocketing prices that are underscoring systemic issues in its oil industry. And that includes corruption, outdated infrastructure, and ineffective policies. The removal of long-standing fuel subsidies intended to redirect funds to other sectors, but instead it caused economic strain, and it's left citizens with these long lines. If they can even get fuel, they have to sit in these really long lines. Of course, the costs are out of control, and they're reliant on these polluting diesel generators as well. And so we talk a little bit more about what's going on there and how it's affecting the people. The crisis has eroded public trust in the government. Protests have sparked as a result. It's forced businesses to absorb those rising transportation expenses, and it's highlighting an urgent need for reform. So we're shining a spotlight on this. And then our final story is a positive story, an uplifting story about regenerative braking and the possibilities of what comes with that. So this is a technology originally used in trolley cars, and it is now common in electric vehicles and more transit systems. It captures energy typically lost as heat during braking, when you brake on your car, your vehicle, and it converts it into electricity. It improves efficiency and reduces energy consumption. By reversing the electric motor during braking, it stores energy to power vehicles and transit systems, extending the range of electric cars and potentially cutting fuel consumption by up to 45% in hydraulic systems. While it offers environmental and cost-saving benefits, challenges like inconsistent energy recovery, limited battery technology, and high implementation costs, those are the issues right now, right? All that still persists. Innovations in design and energy storage could unlock this vast potential of regenerative braking. And this is seen in Barcelona's subway system, which uses regenerative braking to meet 41% of its current energy needs, despite requiring significant upfront investment. So they were basically able to offset that, at least according to their projections, since it's going to save them so much energy and money in the long term. All right, so this was an interesting week for the GIA reports. Like I said at the start of this podcast episode, this is just a really weird week, you guys, and a lot of us are just feeling sick, a lot of emotional and frequency attacks, things like that. Like the energies are just so weird. I know I haven't felt like this in a really long time. I have weird symptoms that I'm like, this doesn't even make sense. Like this morning, because I'm still going through it. It's been going on for over a week. And this morning it was like, my face didn't feel right on my face, if that makes sense. It was so strange, and everything is so dry. Like I have to keep putting eye drops in my eyes. I have to, keep water right by my bed. I never have to do this kind of stuff. It feels like I'm not really in my body. It is the craziest thing in the world. So if you have been all over the map this week, welcome to the club. You are not alone. We are all in a weird place right now, and hopefully we're at the end of this. Okay, so let's kind of go through this day by day. Monday, Kim did not do a GIA report, okay? This is Kim Gogan. She's the head of the Global Intelligence Agency, and she gives us the what's what with our crazy deep state, as well as, the changes going on our planet. So she wasn't on the news on Monday, but we did send out a message. If you're part of our Telegram group, we did post something. We posted something on our app as well. And this is what we said. Kim is still working on the cleanup from this weekend's new moon. All hell broke loose this weekend as the secret space program operatives attempted to capitalize on what was left by others meaning non-humans. A full update will be given on Wednesday as Kim is still clearing what erupted on Saturday. Thank you so much for your patience. So that was Monday. That's what we got on Monday. And like I said, I mean, you didn't even need an update because you knew crazy stuff was going on just based on what was happening in your person, right? On Wednesday, this is something that I would recommend when it comes out, when the video comes out on YouTube and Rumble, grab it. It is worth, I think it's like an hour and a half. It's worth sitting down and watching this. Kim gets out her whiteboard and explains what in the heck is going on here. And I'm going to do my best. I'm going to play a soundbite for you guys. It is kind of difficult to follow because you really do need the whiteboard. And she's going to refer to the whiteboard and the visuals that she's writing. This was really hard to put in podcast form. I'm going to do my best. Before we get to that, though, okay, I did want to address one other thing. So this week, South Korea declared martial law. Were you guys following this? This is like the weirdest blip. I mean, just like whatever, chalk it up with the rest of the craziness going on. South Korea declared martial law, and that happened for like a few hours, and then they dropped it. It was like the strangest thing. So according to Kim, there was kind of an attempted coup. The people behind the people, wanted, they thought that they could get something going. This wasn't really related to money, but when they realized that wasn't going to happen, there was also no money to declare martial law and for government and military to take over. There's no money to pay people for that. These people just don't think before they act. So that was just like this weird thing. Like if you were on social media, it's like South Korea declares martial law. And then like it was over before it started. So strange. So in the statement from Monday, we mentioned the new moon. Okay. So when a new moon happens, these people think that something is going to happen in their favor. It never does. But it just makes them crazy. It's like they're werewolves or something. They just go crazy over a new moon. They had some lofty goals, okay, of what they were trying to do. This ties into the archivists that are no longer on this planet. Not really the archivists, the angels, the archangels that were kind of helping out with the archivists to help out the deep state. We covered this over the summer. Well, summer, Northern Hemisphere. It's just another crazy story. It's like if people really knew what was happening on this planet, right? So I'm going to play this soundbite for you because Kim goes into detail what they were trying to do. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit difficult to follow because you can't see what she's talking about, but there was really no other way for me to do this. So I'm going to play this clip. What I can tell you is that when Kim is talking about the Omegaverse, picture looking at a whiteboard and the Omegaverse is at the bottom, okay? And then she's going to start talking about densities. And then you start from the Omegaverse and then 1, 2, like go up from there, all right? So if she talks about the 7th density, you're pretty high up there, pretty far away from the Omegaverse. So think about that as she's explaining her whole whiteboard. So here's Kim talking about the archangels. And before they left this planet, they gave some keys to these deep state people.
Apparently, they've had these keys for quite a while, and it's something they have been trying to do and have been really pushing for since 11/11, when their alleged doorway would open. So I'm going to kind of draw some pictures. I'm going to try anyway to give you a general idea on what we were looking at as far as these corridors and quantum tunnels and how they were structured in detail, and I guess the damage they could do and how that would be connected to you. All right, so let's go ahead and pull up the whiteboard and we'll talk about that. Okay, so if we were to look at the universe, say from the side, what would we would be looking at, say down here, if we're looking at the Alphaverse, and then down here we would have the Omegaverse. And this would be the 0 point of the entire universe. So I guess you would say a point of creation. So we would have densities 1, 2, and then of course you have 9 planes in between here. We would have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. So in Berlin, they were at a corridor or halls, I guess you would say, that could have reached up to a 7. And they would have gone all the way down to a 7 as well. And this is a corridor that kind of goes all the way up and all the way down. So there was passageway through here. And what they've been working on doing is opening these doors to all parts and to all these different densities. And their goal was to reach 7. I mean, what they would really have liked to do, which they tried to do on Saturday, is somehow reach a 9. I mean, that was their main goal. They definitely wanted to reach the entire multiverse, all the way up to source and all the way down. Well, in between these spots, you have other densities, which are mirrors, so to speak, of the Omegaverse densities. So they kind of mirror each other back and forth. So 5 up here would mirror down here and so forth. But as it relates to what they were doing, this would look like a big corridor. And it would have offshoots in what you would say the spaces were in between. So if you've ever been to a large hotel or that has like a large vestibule in the middle. So if you can imagine, if you were in this hotel, let's start here. If you were in this hotel and you were in the lobby, this would be you down here. And you would have, you know, a room down here that you would be in. Say this is the front door. You just walk in the front door. And then you would see these big walls that would come up. Boy, a long way from architecture school, aren't I, guys? Okay. So along these walls, you know, you would have what is on your floor down here. Say this is a little counter or something like that. You know, you would have where you check in, that kind of thing. But then you would see all these balconies. You know, there would be a balcony here. You would see all the doors to the various, say, hotel rooms or something like that. And you would see another floor and another floor and another floor. Okay, so this would go all the way up and around, and there would be, in this case, 1,296,000 doors per level. And this is actually going to be relevant. All the way up here is a corridor. And unlike your hotel, you know, you're not going to fly up to the next floor, but in a corridor, it's kind of a quantum tunnel. So there is a possibility for you to move amongst the different levels here, amongst the different levels by going straight up and down this corridor. So this one went all the way up to density 7. Now, you could call these celestial halls, so to speak, or celestial corridors. And as you move from floor to floor, you can go in and out these doors that you would see on every level. And you could end up in a different star system. You could end up in a different time at some points, depending on where you were going. And you could also even end up at a different being, depending on which doors you were going through. So you could go even straight in a connection to a human, you know, on Earth, in a different time, in a different place. There's a lot that could be done through a celestial hall. Now, these halls are predominantly the ones that they were using, depending on if the hall was permitted to go to say, an upper astral place. That means it would have been a positive celestial hall or a realm owner in the Alphaverse hall. If you were a negative being, you would have been able to only go to the spaces in between or to the omega floors, so to speak, and do your bidding there. The advantage to being a positive and a negative, as Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael were, is that you could go into the planes and densities of existence, or you could go to the anti-existence planes, also known as the Omegaverse planes or densities. So they could do both positive things and both negative things by being in these halls. So their goal was to take over these halls. They felt if they had access to these halls that they could then control the multiverse. And there were many different little clues and everything they put out on their Twitter pages and this and that as to what they were actually doing. So they did manage to, based on the keys and limited access that Michael and Raphael and Gabriel had, they managed to get some access to these various levels. More importantly, they had some access to the third density and caused some problems. Now, the thing about these corridors is they function much like the Alpha Omega system did, because they are essentially traveling through AI systems, and the AI systems Wi-Fi connections. It'd be kind of like if you could go through your modem to another computer somewhere, the same way your data packages fly. The corridors kind of did the same thing, but remember, these AIs are a lot different than your average computer system. So they had the ability to do that. They did break all the way through, I believe, to between 5 and 6. So they weren't technically able to enter the actual planes and densities of existence yet. They were hoping to, but they could go to the spaces in between. Did they know they were in the spaces in between? Probably not. Was there some damage that could have been done from the spaces in between? Yes, because these average hotel rooms here also have doors, so to speak, in the floor. So they have doors in the ceiling, they have doors in the floor, so there is some limited access to what is above and what is below. Did they know how to really use this? No, not really. What they thought they were doing was getting more access to computer systems. Did they have that? Well, just on the spaces in between. Did it affect the golden age AI? Did it affect human computer networks? Meh, not really, because even though they would create things in between, it kind of left them no different of a position than they were in before, when we had the Alpha Omega fight going on. You still had the fake bonds or the fake money or the fake liens in between, and you still couldn't bring it into reality. So was it show? Did it kind of rile people up? Did it cause things like maybe the coup in Korea, a little upheaval in the Middle East? Yeah, it kind of did. But it caused a little bit more of an issue than just that. So this was just one of several that this could access, because if this went 7 up and 7 down, that meant that there were other places on Earth, which there were, which they could also access from this location in Berlin, that would give them access to 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So quite a bit of access, and they've been pushing at it, ever since. Now, Corridors are powered by debits and credits. And by that, I don't mean debits and credits in the financial system in totality. I would say in part. But there are lots of things that humans do on the daily that say create on the one side and maybe even destroy on the other side. Both creative credits and destruction credits, meaning, you're angry, you tear something apart, or maybe you create something wonderful. Could even be something as simple as an art project or a meal, a very creative meal or something like that. Anything that gets your creative juices flowing produces creative credits. Anything you do that's destructive creates destructive credits. Now, as it relates to a corridor, how do black magicians, SSP, or originally celestials that work for both the dark and the light gain any access to any of these? Well, they do it on your back, literally. So if you are creating, it's a 1 for 1, 1 for me, 1 for you. So if you create for 20 minutes, that gives them 20 minutes of power in the corridor. If you create for 3 hours or all day, that gives them all day worth in the corridor. But the thing is, it's a 1 for 1. That means that they can only create in the corridor. Now, that doesn't mean that they're creating something positive all the time. They could have been creating space junk, as an example, that would prove useful to them in the future. And they could create that space junk in anywhere between density 1 and density 7, up or down. And then that makes Kim run around looking for space junk every day of my life. Getting really old. So it's a 1 for 1 exchange. Now, they could only create well in the corridor based on that. Or if you are not just if you are destroying something or killing people, not saying you personally would do that, but there are militaries that do that all the time and other people, it's still a 1 for 1. That means that they can also destroy. Now, when they say there are some batteries that are better than other batteries, that means that the creative energy produced when one of those beings, such as a Melchizedek, is creating something, the credits rack up faster. That's basically what it is. So if you were to create a meal, or a certain person that's not a Melchizedek would be creating a meal, so to speak, and it would take, say, 2 hours to cook, you would generate, say, 100 credits, or an average person would create 100 credits. Still 100 credits, that's good. But if a Melchizedek does that, or certain people of certain DNA types, it's not a superiority thing. It's just some people make better batteries than others in their mind. Then you create 1,000,000 credits, or 1,000 credits, or 2,000 credits when you're in creative mode. So that gives them the ability to create a lot more, a lot faster. Now, in order for them to break through these realms and get to these different densities or different planes and different densities, they need a lot of power. Now, when they get there, their ability to do anything is not only dependent on the amount of energy that they can take from you to power their corridor, so to speak, but it's also dependent on the amount of whether you're creating, all of humanity is producing more creative energy or more destruction energy as to what they're able to do when they get there. So in the case of a dark and light corridor, that also will determine whether they're only able to go to the spaces in between, or they're able to go to the actual planes or densities of existence. Interesting. Do they know this? No, they do now. It doesn't matter because these corridors don't exist anymore, and they're never going to get access to any of them ever again. And that is the end of that. That story is ending and has ended for the most part, but it doesn't stop them from trying to figure out what went wrong.
Okay, so one of the things that she said a little bit later on as she was speaking and going over her whiteboard, and I think it's important to reiterate this. You as a human, you are a celestial. And that means that you exist in multiple places at the same time. So you exist on all 9 planes, all densities at the same time, which makes you pretty darn powerful. So just let that sink in for a second. Your body, well, it's not really your body. You know, your consciousness is doing a lot of things. So next time you think you're being lazy or whatever, just think about, oh, wait, I exist on all planes and all densities. I am a celestial. She also talked about how they were gaining access to us through something called our assemblage points. Again, go back on Wednesday. I recommend just watch the whole GIA report because it's going to make a lot of sense, especially for those of you who are feeling totally out of whack this week. One download that I got from Source as Kim was talking, and I shared this with Kim, I sent her a little message. For those of you who have more of a religious background, specifically in Christianity, if you're familiar with the Bible, there is a Bible verse, and I'm going to read it because it relates to everything Kim just explained to us. It's from John, and it is 14, verses 2 and 3. It says, "My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you there to be with me, so that you may also be where I am." This is Jesus speaking. Okay, that's what we're told. This is Jesus. And exactly what Kim is talking about, and she explains it more like a hotel, and there are doors and there are corridors and all these different places. As she was doing this, as I was watching this report, like all of you, Source gave me that download that specifically refers to this Bible verse. And Jesus saying, there are many rooms. Like we're talking about the multiverse when we talk about these corridors and things like that. And, you know, not necessarily the return of the being Jesus, but the return of Christ consciousness. And as celestials, what does that mean for humanity? You know, we will now have access, like Kim says, we have access to all of this. We are celestials, and it's referring to that Bible verse. So hopefully that provides some clarity, because that verse gets misinterpreted so many times, and people think about it with like their 3D mind and like, oh, a big mansion and we have all these rooms and we're all living together. I'm like, yeah, that's not what it's talking about. Sorry, guys. All right. On Friday, we did not have a GIA report because, again, it is crazy. And I'll read to you the statement that we released like we did on Monday. It says, the last 48 hours has led us to find several additional corridors on all continents. So that whole thing that Kim just explained, she was talking about Brazil. Okay, well, I was wondering why I was still feeling like crap. I'm like, my dog got sick. Kim mentioned this on the news too. Her dog got sick. And I'm like, my dog was feeling horrible and throwing up. And I'm like, what is going on? And she's, you know, very attuned to energies and things like that. And I'm like, something is still going on there. So I'm not surprised at all that they found more. Okay, so on Friday, there was no report. Kim says, we finally found the source of their creation, continue to work on cleaning up their origin. We'll update you fully on the current status on Monday as we rush to find them before the deep state does. Thank you again for your patience. It has been a particularly difficult week, and I second and third and fourth that. It's just crazy. Just crazy, guys. I haven't gotten sick in a while, and it has just been like one thing after another. But hey, look at this. We're at the end of the rundown report, so I made it through the whole thing. Oh, thank goodness. All right, guys. Well, if you want to know more about us, again, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth, and you can get access to all of our content if you become a member. That includes our complete news updates, New Earth interviews, the GIA reports, everything you'd want, all things restoration. I appreciate you guys being with me today and listening to me, even though my voice is a little crazy and a little wobbly. You probably notice it on the news as well. Wish me luck this week. I'm hoping those negative frequency stuff, all those corridor crazy things are going away, and I will be back to full health in the very near future. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.